So let me just introduce you guys. I'm Drew Cecil. I'm on the board of the Bridger Canyon Properties Owners Association. We're here tonight to have a forum webinar on forest restoration and remediation in the wake of the Bridger Canyon Foothills fire. And tonight we're joined by Eric Hoberg and Chuck Gesme. I'm sorry, Chuck, from Northwest Management in Helena. Northwest Management's a forest consulting firm that's sort of a top to bottom group that can work with landowners on everything from logging all the way down to reseeding and property management. So we're hoping tonight these guys will help us understand some things we can do in the short term, medium term, and long term. Landowners who've been affected by the fire, and those of us in the community who care to help remediate and do what we can to help folks out around here. So with that, I will hand it over to Chuck and Eric. We will have the chat turned off. If folks have questions, there will be contact information put up on the screen at the end of the call for you to follow up with Eric or Chuck or anyone on the board of the Bridger Canyon Property Owners Association. So while we are going to kind of keep this thing tight for the time being, there are opportunities for folks who want more information to get it as they need it. So with that, let me hand it over to Chuck and Eric. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. We appreciate your time and your willingness to work with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna try to share screen here. Yeah. So are you guys seeing the slideshow there?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so yeah, we just kind of put this together just to try to get the information out there of what options landowners have post-fire as far as forest restoration, as well as any activities that they would possibly want to do on their land. And so our main goal here is to get information out there, as well as give landowners the tools they need to get that forest operations running again. So with that, we'll just go ahead and start. So just a little bit about Northwest. We're a forest consulting firm founded in 1984. And like Drew said, we do top to bottom. So anything from logging all the way to grass seeding. We do forest inventories, right management plans. So pretty much anything to do with natural resources. Either myself or Eric can do it, or we have coworkers at either other offices, or we have a wide variety of professionals. So if there is anything, then we are available. So if you do have questions, yeah. So a little bit about us. I'm Chuck Gesme. I'm a professional forester at Northwest Management. I graduated with a bachelor's in science in forest operations from the University of Montana. And I worked with Northwest since 2011. Before that, I worked with the Idaho Department of Lands. So I have a wide base of background in forestry. So Hoberg, if you want to.
Hi, yeah, I'm Eric Hoberg, senior forester here in Montana. I graduated from with a forestry degree in 2006, started with Northwest Management the following day. We were just 2 of 50 employees of Northwest Management. We were spread across Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, and cover more ground as well. As Chuck was saying, we do have a lot of resources we can reach out to within the company if it's beyond the scope of work for Chuck and I. But yeah, we like to look at it as a kind of a turnkey operation.
Good. So just a small background. I mean, you guys are very aware of where the fire burned. But so this is just a map of the area. Started September 4th, burned around 8,000 acres, with 6,700 of that being on private. And so why I just wanted to put this up there is just to kind of show you that there is so much of it on private land. And that's why we're just trying to get that information out there of things that people can do. So let's just keep moving on. So yeah, end of my services. So this is where we would come in, and a big part of that initial first step after a fire such as this is removal of that standing dead. And for this, we can administer the harvest planning, layout, and facilitation between loggers and spires. So that's the mill. And with this, it very much is an economy of scale. So the more landowners that work with each other, the less your actual total project cost per landowner is. Because if a logger has to come for 5 acres, it's going to cost more to get that wood out than if he comes for 200. And so by landowners working with each other, so that we only have to go there for kind of one job, if you will, even though if it might be a dozen different landowners. And I don't know, Hoberg, if you want to talk a little bit about the logging process.
Yeah, so most everything that would be feasible here would be what they call ground-based logging, which should involve skidders and feller bunchers or hand fallers, processors on the land, either by hand or with a mechanical processor. I've spoke with Ed Regan down at RY, and they're more than interested to buy burnt Douglas fir, as long as the wood isn't charred, just the bark, for a pretty decent rate, a little bit higher than he had been the last couple of years. So that's good news for everyone that needs to send this wood somewhere, right? Help cover the cost of the cleanup. Doing this, you'd end up either using the slash as some erosion control or putting it all in a pile, which you'd come back and burn next fall. Timing on this, anytime going forward between now and spring would be good. And having snow and frozen ground is to your advantage. Just less soil compaction, less risk of erosion or soil disruption. So not that there needs to be a big hurry, but we are moving into some of the better logging months. So I think that covers that, Chuck.
Yeah, excellent. So the next point we would say is forest evaluation and appraisal. And for this is mainly used for insurance claims and lawsuits. And so what this process does is assigns a monetary value to non-merchantable lumber or timber. So what we're doing here is trying to come up with a system so that we can assign a monetary value to those trees that might not be worth anything at the mill, but obviously they were worth something to the landowner. And it's difficult because you have to be able to come up with a process that you can replicate by a third party and come up with a somewhat similar number. For us, what we do is we do an inventory of all those dead trees, and we come up with a number of how many trees that you lost in that fire, come up with an average age, and try to calculate how much that tree cost if we were to plant it, say, 50 years ago. And so for that tree to grow up to be what it was, we inflate the cost of planting that tree in 1950 times how many years it is till now or when it burned. And that's the assigned value to that single tree. We then extrapolate that over the entire property. And it's just a way that tries to assign a value to timber and to forest lost during a fire without actually logging anything. And that really gets used mostly for insurance claims or lawsuits. And so that is another option. We would come out to your land, do a full inventory of the forest, write a plan, and from that, it would get you a value. So moving on to the next point, we have vegetation cleanup and removal. And so a lot of that would happen during the logging process, of the removal of those dead trees and things like that. And outside of logging, if you did just have, say, a hiking trail or something that you still wanted to utilize, but you had some dead trees around it and you're maybe not interested in entirely logging, but you want to make sure that nothing dead can fall on you while you're hiking or something. That's another option of things that we can do. Again, and to get rid of that slash from logging, like Eric was saying, we can either what's called a lop and scatter and just kind of scatter along the hillside, or we can pile it all up and burn it the following fall. And so those are just a couple of the options. We got some more slides here. So another thing to consider after a fire such as this is reforestation and seedling establishment. And so after the fire, you'll likely have some natural regeneration of pockets that missed, and some of those Douglas firs in the area still have viable seed sources. So If you wait long enough, that area will naturally reforest. By going in 2 years after and actually physically planting a bunch of trees, then all you're really doing is fast forwarding that process. And so that is another thing that we offer. We would come in, look at your land, see what was there, see what a good seedling reestablishment regimen would be. So in this case, it would likely be a lot of Douglas firs. And so we would administer the actual physical planting of those as well as the purchase. So you would just come to us saying, I want to replant this forest. And we would just come back to you with a price tag of what that would cost. And that's based on seed availability as well as crews. And so what would you say right now, about 2 years for that?
Yeah, so I looked into the state nursery to see what they have for seedlings available. And you can't just go plant any Doug fir anywhere you want within the state. They're fairly elevation site specific. And currently the state has about 1,200 Doug fir seedlings available for that Bozeman area, which would not get us very far. So if a lot of people are interested in reforestation, we'd have to put together a large order, and then you're about 1.5 years out from when you place the order to when those seedlings are ready. So that is something for people to keep in mind. In order to get seedlings, if you're looking to replant, ordering sooner than later is recommended.
Yeah, and that time frame's perfectly fine as far as wanting to get a forest back quickly. Why it takes 2 years is because after the order goes in, they actually have to grow those trees. And so it's not like there's a stockpile somewhere and they're on back order or something. They physically have to be grown. So
yeah, they have to collect the seed source.
Yeah, they have to get the seed source and they have to grow them. And that's where that 2 years comes from. And that's something that can be done a little bit faster that will also greatly help with erosion control would be grass restoration. And so a lot of you probably are seeing currently that natural grass is already starting to come back. And again, with the grass seed, what we're doing is essentially pressing fast forward and getting us to a spot that forest would get naturally over the next few years, just helping it along, helping it reestablish. And what that grass seed does to help with erosion is it can suck up a lot of that water that normally would either be running down the hill or in the past was sucked up by all the vegetation that was on that forest. And again, so what we would do is get an order for an area. We'd go out, see the area that they want to do, create maps, figure out the acres, and then come up with an optimal seed mix for that area. We would order that, and then after we get it in, we would go out there and do the physical seeding of it.
Yeah, depending on acres, we have some younger forest techs that do our grass seeding by hand, which I'm sure you've seen folks with what they call the belly grinder, and they go around and grass seed. Large enough acreage, there's a helicopter company out of the Bitter we work with quite often that will do aerial grass seeding, and that can range anywhere from $40 to $60 an acre to grass seed that way.
Yeah, and so again, this all goes back to economy of scale. I mean, you can absolutely grass seed individual properties, and we can be contracted to grass seed individual properties. But if you get enough landowners together and get large acres kind of contiguous, then that aerial grass seeding is probably going to be the way you want to go. It would just end up being less expensive for the landowner overall and a lot more efficient for us. So after that, insect mitigation is definitely something that I would consider after a burn like this. And so what we're looking at here is areas maybe on the edges of where that burn is, or maybe a property that still has green timber on it that they're planning on saving and trying to get to live through. So what happens after a fire such as this is all that food source for the insects in the area is now gone. So anything that's left in green is going to be hit that much harder in this coming season. In that area, your biggest culprits are going to be the spruce budworm and the Douglas fir beetle. And so for the budworm, we would do an aerial spray if an area had it. And this is again mainly focusing on those fringe areas on the border of the fire. But the Douglas fir beetle is very prevalent in that area, and to focus on the trees that you have left on your property and trying to make sure that those are retained. In the spring, what we would recommend is purchasing MCH packets, which is a pheromone packet. And what it does is after you attach it to the tree, it'll trick that insect into saying, this area is already infested, so I'm going to have to look elsewhere. And that we've seen very good success rates with that. We've been using it all over the state for quite some time. For those of you that have heard of verbenone and the mountain pine beetle, it's the same concept, but this is for a different beetle that attacks a different species of trees. So for insect mitigation, I would absolutely say contact us in well, as soon as you want, really, and I can put you on a list to call in the spring. And for that, it's the kind of thing where you don't have to apply for that right now to get it. You can call me in the spring and I can see what our availability is. Obviously, it's always easier for planning purposes. If you know that's something you're interested, I can just put you on the list to ensure that you do get it. But yeah, if you do have green trees on your property, or you have some of that fringe area that's maybe some burned, some not, for insects, those trees that are not burned are going to become a much more valuable target this coming spring, because of that 8,000 acres that burned, a lot of that is going to be completely dead and not viable for an insect to want to go after. So they'll just fly until they see the next viable option, which in this case is those green trees that are left. Yeah, and I guess, well, do you have anything else on insects?
No, you've got it pretty well covered. Thanks, Chuck.
Excellent. Yeah, and then I guess after that, just in generic services, we have tech services. So if after this fire you lost all your boundaries or your fence line or something like that, another service that we do provide is we could go out there and ground truth your property boundaries, figure out where old fences are, and make some very detailed maps of your property. The maps that we do make are not legal, so like it's not like a surveyor coming out, but the price difference is a lot different. So for us, it would be $75 an hour to come out and get a fairly accurate map of your property, whereas surveyors are $400 an acre, or can be more. So if you just wanted to like replace a fence or something and you wanted to make sure that you're staying on your property, that's the kind of situation you would do. If it is for some kind of legal reason, or you're selling your land or something like that, then we would not be the correct choice for that. That's when you would need a surveyor.
Right.
So yeah, and then so just the next step. So moving forward from this meeting and seeing where to go. So I'd say number one is to schedule a site visit with Northwest Management, either myself or Eric, to go down and physically look at your property. Now, the next time I am available to go down there is Friday, October 30th. That being said, a lot of times, if you just have broad questions such as, is my property even viable for logging or something like that, or you could email me questions and I'll respond to those before the 30th. But the 30th is the next time that I would be available to actually make some physical site visits down in the Bozeman area. And I'm available other days but the 30th, but the 30th and onward is when I could start scheduling trips to come down there, meeting with individuals. And again, with this, all these projects with forestry are very much an economy of scale. So if you do start thinking that this is something that you're interested in, I would highly encourage you to talk to your neighbors and see if you can't get contiguous acres of forest land together, because the more acres that a project is, kind of the less your project cost will be. Because if you think of it, if you have 5 acres and you want to pay to have a logger come take all that wood, right now you're paying for 100% of that mobilization cost of that logger's time, of us admitting the project. But as you add more landowners to that price gets divvied up more and more and more. So economy of scale is definitely good when you're talking about forest projects. So what we would do after I met with you, or we have an email exchange and start to get your questions, is just get a timeline of when forest activities are going to take place. Like Eric was mentioning earlier, we're coming up on some very good months for logging. And so that should be first and foremost in some people's minds. With this salvage logging, that mill will only take that wood if the inside is not charred and the inside is still merchantable. So within a year of this event, this fire is going to be your highest success rate of getting some money back from that standing timber. and mitigating the cost of that logging. The longer you wait, the more that wood's going to deteriorate, and the less likely the mill will take it at all. And in that case, it just makes your cost of removing that standing dead increase about every year. So if that's something that interests you, I would definitely recommend talking to your neighbors, trying to get economy of scale. And from that, we can move forward with trying to get together an actual cost of what it would be for individual landowners to get that logging done. It's hard to say right now because we don't have a commitment from landowners or things like that. So, and then after logging in the spring, we would come back, we would grass seed, and just do some minor restoration. If there's piles to burn, we'd make sure that those are good in good places. Once grass seeding is done, the following fall, we would come back and burn any piles that are present, if that is an option that a landowner goes with. And then about a year after that, when those Douglas fir seeds grow into plugs that are viable enough to survive being planted, then we would plant. And that would be about the wrap up on a reforestation after a fire, about a 2-year process. So if you are interested in anything that we've kind of gone over today, if you have additional questions, you can call or email me. I have all my contact information on the next slide. And so, yeah, and like I said, I'm more than happy to schedule site visits. Oh yeah, and so these are our fees for general non-project attached work. So if I haven't been out to your property yet, we do offer one free site assessment, just so you can kind of, I suppose, dip your toe in the water of what a site assessment in forestry looks like. We can really get a focused look at what your property is and really get our recommendations. But from what I've seen in that area, pretty much if you have any large mature trees that are dead on your property, I would recommend the full logging, grass seed, and replant. I haven't seen anywhere that I wouldn't recommend that. An area that I can picture not recommending it is if you're maybe mostly grassland or you didn't have much timber on your property to start with. Obviously, we're a forestry company, so if you're mostly grazing land or something, we could work with you getting grass seed, but you might not want to pay for that cost of logging if you're not going to get much benefit for it. But that's about the only thing I can think of that would be non-applicable for a forester. For Eric and myself, our rates are $75 an hour after that. And we have forest techs that also work for the company that can do things like come out there and just flag boundaries in and things like that. They're $65 an hour. And our mileage is billed at a rate of 60 cents a mile. And if you have anything else on that, I think that's
pretty well covered.
Covers our fees. And so here's the contact information. So that's my cell phone number and my email. Those are the best ways to reach us. If you Google Northwest Management, I believe the first number that comes up is our office phone that's here. We do check those messages regularly, but again, I'm out of the office quite a bit. The other forester that works here is out of the office and in and out. So I would definitely say that the best way to contact myself is with that phone number or my email. Then yeah, right below it is that office phone and office address. And then, so I also listed a link. Our website is just www.northwestmanagement.com. And that will also go over a lot of our services, expanded in other areas that are not fire related, such as forest inventory or anything like that. So if you do have some more questions, you can poke around the website, call me or email me. And I think that would be the best way to move forward after the fire. So I don't know if you have any.
Right. Yeah, I imagine you guys have been fed a lot of information over the last couple of weeks. I watched a pretty good talk that Peter Cole did for you guys a few weeks ago. So I think most people are pretty well versed on wildfires and forest, how to reforest and deal with them. So we just wanted to let everyone know who we were and what we can offer, and here to help if anybody sees the need.
Yeah, and that's about the end of our spiel. I'll just leave my contact information, or actually, yeah, I mean, I'll just leave my contact information up there if anybody wants to copy it down. We are recording this meeting, so I will make that available. I'll get that to Drew. And if you'd like a copy of that, Drew, does that work for you, I suppose?
I think you may have muted him.
I may have muted everybody.
Yeah, that works for me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, that works. Can I just throw a couple of questions at you guys really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I have sort of two general questions. One, just in terms of priority, the way I hear you guys explaining things is it would first go logging, then go reseeding, then go replanting. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. And wire logging is number one priority. Is we're trying to salvage as much value from that standing dead as we can, so that you can offset those costs of actual removal. And for erosion control, there's a couple different options. There's not very much you can do from this moment until the spring. In the springtime is when we would come back and grass seed.
Okay.
And just because if you were to go out and throw a bunch of seeds now, especially with how cold it's about to get, nothing would take yet. And so
Yeah.
those seeds would just sit there until the spring anyway. And that just gives them more opportunity to get blown around and maybe miss some areas. So that's why the recommendation for erosion control would be taking place in the spring. Now, during logging, if you were to do a lop and scatter, and that's with the tops and the non-merchantable parts just spread across the hillside, that is one way to possibly mitigate for some erosion this winter.
Yeah, if people are interested and worried about erosion, between lop and scatter and doing an actual contour falling where you're dropping that submerge parallel with the slope, and you could even peg it in with a few branches or stakes to keep it there. It can act as kind of erosion control and erosion bars on the landscape until you start getting that grass growing in the spring. And if there is a potential salvage harvest you're looking at and you were to grass seed ahead of time, I haven't ever tried it, but my thought is you'd end up sweeping all that grass seed down the hill with every turn of logs, because you'd have a whole tree operation. So the whole tree comes down, each limb and branch is going to just continue to remove that grass seed and bring it down to the bottom of the hill. If you're not looking to remove any burnt material, you could grass seed this winter. You guys probably get enough snow there in Bridger that'll help hold it in place, but clearly it's not going to germinate until the spring. So early spring grass seeding should work just fine.
Yep.
Okay. And then can you guys just sort of address a little bit about complications given a lot of the geography of the Bridgers involves steep hills? I mean, how does that affect your guys' ability, or a logger's ability, or a grass seed ability? I mean, does it obviously it makes it more difficult, but
Right. Yeah.
what kind of goes on in your guys' head when you think about a forest plan in that kind of terrain?
Yeah, so we looked at a couple of jobs 2 weeks ago, I believe, that were down there. And one thing right away is, with 5 and 10 acre parcels, if there's fairly steep terrain, it may be hard to get to all of it. And the other issue is with gravity, you pretty much always have to haul trees, skid trees downhill. It's very difficult to adverse skid everything. And downhill isn't always onto your property. So at times there's going to have to be, some letters and contracts written between you and the neighbor just to use part of their property or access through their property in order to get your timber out. Because your house might be on top of the hill and everything's below you and it's all going to go down. That was the case with 2 landowners that we looked at before. Was everything was going downhill towards the neighbors, and there was going to have to be an agreement. I think that's kind of what you're referring to. There's also quite rocky. There might be patches that are really difficult to reach. Basically, the price just increases because it's all about how much time it takes to get that wood out to the landing. A lot of stuff on fairly steep ground can still be cut by hand and skid with a cat, but yeah, it's just a lot more timely. So instead of a fee of like $35 a ton, it might be $45 a ton. So a lot of it is doable. It's just more costly. Does that kind of answer most of it for you, Drew?
Drew, I think you got muted again there. Hold on. Here, I'm gonna.
I mean, I think the thing is, it needs, you know, on a case by case basis, it's sort of you know, it's important that folks try to get you guys to come out, or someone to come take a look at what's going on and get some sense of what's going to be in their property.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And with the logging operation, I think having that opportunity to mitigate your costs of the removal of that standing dead by selling those logs is
Right.
Highly desirable. So
Yeah.
just trying to get landowners to talk to each other and get that
Okay.
economy of scale together. And like we were saying, with it
Yeah.
deteriorating every year, the first year after the event is going to be your prime window for getting that done. So
Yeah, and just cooperating with each other. Like I say,
yep.
you may have to take everything out through your neighbors or on your
Yep.
neighbor's driveway or use your neighbor's road in order to make this happen. So, and we, in our line of work, we put together a contract and have both landowners sign every time we do anything like that. Even if
Yep.
they're the best of friends and shake hands.
Covers all the bases. And that's also something that we would set up is, okay, we have to go through this landowner. We'll get his information, your information. We would do all the writing of the contracts and such, and then bring that to you. So,
Okay.
yeah, after we went out and looked at an area, we'd come out with logistically the best way to get those trees out. And from that, we would move forward with writing the actual plan of, all right, so this is what we're going to log. This is how we're going to do it. And it'd all be very clear to the landowner of what we're doing out there. It's not like we go out there and just let a logger run loose. We're very, we administer to it. We'd be down there frequently making sure everything's working well and everybody knows what's happening. So
Very
Okay.
transparent and methodical.
Okay. Good.
So, yeah, no, and with that, I think if there is any additional questions, I encourage you to email me or call me.
I think there's a,
Yep, I just saw that. Garth is asking to unmute.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah. Andrew had tight control over this one, I think.
Yeah,
Our experience last time.
yeah,
Thank you. Very good session. Very helpful information. It seems like at least half the battle here right now is on recovery, which we're talking about today, but also prevention. Given that we've gotten a pretty harsh, reality lesson learned, the trees in the South Canyon have largely burned, and that's not going to happen again anytime soon in most of the areas. So we'll figure out how to recover. The folks in the North Canyon, however, still have a lot of fuel. And I was wondering, do you have any thoughts or advice or offer services for how to go ahead and take advantage of the lessons learned in the South Canyon to help better prepare the North Canyon? So if fire is going to happen, it's probably more likely to happen going forward than it was looking back for who knows what reasons. And I know on our property, which is just above Mitch Miller's on the grassy side of Bridger Canyon Road, across from Bridger Bowl, we did thinning on our 60 acres about a decade ago and did all the hanging of the stuff for the pine bark beetle and the spruce budworm and everything, and have a pretty nicely thinned set of property. And that's supposed to make the fire comes through. If it's a really heavy windblown fire, it's going to take everything out. But if it's on the margins, the fire severity ought to be significantly reduced. My sense is, a Forest Service has its own plan for what it's going to do up in the North Bridgers for that property. But there's a lot of forest that isn't Forest Service that we ought to go ahead and think about. What can we do to go ahead and lessen the chances of a really severe fire burning and doing as much damage as has been done in some of the South Bridgers? Do you have any thoughts about that?
yes, absolutely. So pretty much what you're describing is what we would refer to as a fuel reduction project.
Right.
So we undertake a lot of those to try to increase the fire safety of a property. And so there's a lot of different things that we can do for that. And so moving forward, it's pretty much we'd have to go out to the property, identify the risk factors of the area. And so things to watch out for are like dense timber, a lot of standing dead. If you have young trees underneath old trees, those can act as ladder fuels. And so what we would do then is we'd work with the landowner, understanding their goals of what is for that property and come up with the best solution for removal of, a lot of times it would be thinning. So we would go out and we remove the trees so that it comes down to something like 15 to 20 feet between individual trees. And that will greatly reduce the risk of a fire moving from the forest floor to the canopy, which is really what you're trying to stop.
Right.
You do have fire in there and it's low intensity, it's on the ground, stays on the ground. That's the goal of that. Obviously nothing we can do can 100% say that you're not going to have fire on your property. And certainly in situations where you have a catastrophic fire, there's not much that, I mean, beyond clearing all the timber off of the property, there's really nothing you can do when it's a catastrophic fire. But that being said, I've seen these fuel reductions work time and time again of keeping a low severity burn at low severity, which is the main goal of those. So I do highly recommend fuel reductions. And a lot of times those are a case by case basis. But I would say if you have dense timber, if you have young trees underneath old trees, and if you have dead trees on your property, then you would definitely be a candidate for a fuel reduction.
And so your advice is that you think I'm looking for your expertise on what works, what doesn't work, and based on what we've got up there in the North Bridges right now, what needs to be done to go ahead and help reduce the chances of what happened in the South Bridges spreading north sometime.
Yeah, and once again, it helps a lot if you create defensible space and do a fuel reduction for your property and your house.
Right.
But if you're an island in the middle of a sea, it only helps so much.
Right.
When a whole neighborhood or a whole street or
HOA
gets together and everybody joins in and you do the common space, everything, now you've really created defensible space and in a place, an area that, is less likely to see that catastrophic fire.
Right. And for the folks on the call, anybody else on the call who can chime in, I just moved back here after being away for many, many years. I've just been back here now the last few months. And I don't have a good sense of, what's been done and what property owners have done so far in the canyon. But it seems like that would be something that would be fairly high urgency, issue and question is to go ahead and kind of assess, given what we've experienced in the South Canyon, which was fortunately nobody died, but it was clearly a lesson learned. What are our needs? What does it look like? We don't control the Forest Service property, but all the rest of the property, should we go ahead and for our properties and maybe recommend it for other properties, we get a survey or a quick look through to see, what our recommendations are for how to go ahead and reduce fire, mitigate the effects of a future fire going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Hoberg said, the bigger the area that you have, the more benefit that you're going to see. And with the fuel reduction, when you're working with like an HOA or an entire neighborhood or something like that, even if you do have a very large fire coming in and it hits that fuel break, there's enough of a change that a lot of times in that area, it'll move from high intensity to low intensity in underneath that fuel reduction area and then burn around it. And
it gives the firefighters a chance. A lot of times when they go to protect a house, they're looking at how safe are they.
Right.
And if they're protecting a house that has defensible space and the trees have been thinned, they're a lot more comfortable to stay there and protect your house. So that's another thing to consider. And
I've seen a lot of the pictures we've seen of fires in California and Oregon. Will show remarkably, they'll show whole neighborhoods and schools and structures totally burned out, but a lot of the tall trees, the tops of the trees are untouched.
mm-hmm.
Which to me shows
that'll happen in the heavily wind-driven fire, where it's just
right.
moving so fast that it's just right along the ground, and it just rips.
And then the
I've seen some of those
intensity,
photos, and, yeah.
the intensity of that is driven by how many small trees and underbrush you've got there. And if you can go ahead and clear that out and thin that out, the chances of that kind of fire spreading rapidly and threatening structures and your forest, you know, is reduced, right? So this to me seems like it's a matter of some urgency. I'm sorry if I'm you know, I think the recovery element here is obviously very urgent as well. But I think I'd love to see us address the prevention aspect as well as much as we can.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a service that we provide. And so, yeah, if that is something you're interested, that my contact information is a great way to get a hold of me. With those fuel reductions as well, a lot of times there is grant money available to get some kind of cost share for those projects. And so, and that's also a service that we would do is anytime we have a fuel reduction, so down in the Bozeman area, is I would get in contact with all these different agencies that I know have grant money and see if they have something disposable for that area, and then I would submit a plan to them. They would approve or some such, whatever their process is. And so that's just another way that you can try to mitigate the cost of a fuel.
I think we work with MSU Extension.
Yep.
And we got a grant paid for half the cost.
Correct. Yeah. 50-50 is a very common one.
Right. Okay. Any other comments on that topic from folks on the Drew?
I mean, we did that on our property, exactly the process that Chuck described and what sounds like you have done as well. We did that, I guess it's been a couple of 3 years ago, and it worked very well for us. We had we have a mix of timber and pasture on our property, and we actually used Northwest, and they came in and marked trees, did everything that needed to be done. We went through NRCS to get the grant, and you know, I don't feel like you said, Garth, I don't think our property is perfect. I think we got very lucky in this fire, in fact, because, you know, if it had crossed TP Ridge Road, I think we were sort of looking down the barrel of the gun. But I do think that we are a lot better off than we were prior to our thinning project. Yeah. So yeah, I agree.
Is that something we should recommend as a board, you know, to the property owners in the parts of the canyon that have not burned down yet?
I agree. I mean, I think it's, you know, and we did it as, you know, it helped with our insurance rate. I mean, it was sort of it did cost us money. It was not free. We did not have enough merchantable timber on our property to cover our cost. So even with the grant, we had to pay.
And when we did it, it turned out to be free because maybe the price of timber was higher a decade ago or so.
Yeah, or maybe your logs were just better than our logs were.
Maybe, but it was essentially, we were able to go ahead and do it, get the match, and it didn't cost us anything to go ahead and thin the forest because they were able to go ahead and sell the wood they took out. Well,
that's the way to do it. And I would imagine a lot of people's property has that, you know, they have that kind of timber on it. We did not. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and that's also something that we could look at when, if you're looking at getting a project like that together, is we would come out and say, this is the process that I recommend using, clearing out this kind of timber, and all that would kind of develop as we're working with a distinct area, because for those fuel reductions, you really kind of have to see them first,
right?
To really start driving at what process of timber removal and if we can sell the logs, if there's grant money available. But moving forward, yeah, just email or call and we can start setting something up. And just the more I work with individual landowners or HOA boards or things like that, the more dialed in that plan will get.
I think Bill had his hand raised.
Yeah, I think Bill had a question.
Where's that? William Dennis?
Can you unmute him? Can you unmute him?
I can unmute him, yeah.
Okay. Bill,
you got a question?
I'll be quick. None of my land burned either, fortunately. And I've only got 20 acres, about half of it wooded on a pretty steep hillside with a little creek at the bottom of the hill, and the other half shrubs and grass. Is that something you guys would come out and just take a look at and give me some ideas about what should be done or might be done?
Yeah, absolutely. So Things like that, like individual cases, we'd come out there if it's on a very, very steep hillside or something where we don't think we could get the logs out, but we know we
I don't think it's loggable stuff for the most part, probably.
or non-merchantable, then
Yeah.
by us going out and looking at your property, there is always going to be a way that we can get that timber out of there. It's just it comes down to budget and just timeline of when you would want it done.
Yeah, and sometimes depending on what your goals are, a hand crew to come in and cut and pile that smaller undergrowth just to remove that ladder fuel and clean things up and thin it out is the way to go.
Yep.
You know, it's fairly inexpensive. You might still qualify for a grant depending on the location of the stand of timber. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be mechanical. There's a lot of options out there to reach your goals.
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to bring in an excavator or a skidder or something like that. It might just be 5 guys and a chainsaw are the best fit for that specific property. So after we look at it, we would pretty much give you the.
Thanks. That's very helpful.
Just cutting off low branches. I guess you want to have all the branches down below 10 feet cut off essentially.
Yeah, pruning and that kind of thing.
Pruning and right, just all that ladder fuel. Again, if you can keep that as a low grass fire, it's just all the difference in the world.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Drew, is that something we should go ahead and bring up more broadly with Tom and the rest of the board members, you think?
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, I think it's a tough call. It's an individual choice. But yeah, I mean, I think if there's a way to encourage folks to do that, I mean, obviously the canyon, you know, everyone, you know, everyone would benefit
Right.
by having their properties, you know, less prone to a catastrophic wildfire.
There's economies of scale too, if you can go ahead and do multiple properties,
sure.
right?
Yeah. And it's sort of like these guys were saying, if you're just going to do it yourself, you're kind of an island in a storm, right? Or you're, you know, it's hard, but, you know, by the same token, you do what you can do. And that was sort of our approach. Was we felt like this was going to make we would feel more comfortable living where we lived, having done what we did.
Right.
I don't know. Would it have stopped? I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you.
Well, I guess the experts are telling us that it definitely helps, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
And we've seen it work. Actually, last year there was a fire north of Helena that stopped at one of our fuel reductions.
Wow.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth bringing up. And I think it's also just like, you know, Cindy has been constantly feeding our webpage with resources on what to do, and it just raising awareness with people on that there are things that you can do is an important first step, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for sidetracking us, but I thought
No, it's fine.
Perfect.
That's good.
that was a good issue to bring up.
Yeah.
Over here. Yeah, no, it's a very good point. So yeah. Well, yeah, I think Drew, unless you have some more questions, I think the best way to move forward is to contact myself directly with questions or setting up site visits. And yeah, like I said, I'm available starting the 30th forward. But if you just have questions or things like that, you can email me, call me. And I have my contact information. Drew and Cindy both have that as well. I had that slide up for a while, so.
We'll share this.
Yeah, we'll share the slideshow and this recording of the Zoom meeting as well.
It was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody got any final thoughts?
I guess I can't see everybody.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being here. I will throw in one thing that I have learned. I have folks who are administering the Bridger Canyon Fire Relief Fund through the Community Foundation and the United Way. And there does appear to be some opportunity for those who are interested in some remediation, maybe having access to some of those funds. It's not completely clear how they're allocating the fund yet. They are still working with more high priority sort of emergency type relief folks that really need clothes on their back and whatnot. But there could be the opportunity particularly if a group of landowners got together for something like a reseeding project. A timber project may be more extensive than they have the ability to help with, but maybe a reseeding project. So,
Could it be used for burying propane tanks?
I think they would be more likely to do a project or allocate funds to something that had more of a I don't know, more of a community benefit. So something that was, rather than burying tanks, but if they could get a helicopter in the air for a certain number of hours and reseed,
Right.
several hundred acres.
Right.
Something like that, I think they would be potentially interested in, which isn't to say that if an individual applied for funding to bury a propane tank, that they would not do that. I know they've given out some money for fencing. They have given out money. They initially offered a flat amount. I think it was $1,500 or $2,000 to every landowner who lost a structure. I think that's right. I can't remember the exact amount of money, but it was a flat fee. And so they've done that, and now they're sort of moving into their next stage of where's the need,
right?
In determining need. And so, my point was, well, there's going to be a need for forest restoration and remediation, and it's more than just, it's something that has a broader impact than perhaps just, an individual landowner. It could be everybody downhill from that landowner who might be subject to that property owner's erosion or things like that. So it definitely piqued their interest. And made them realize that there could really be some value in allocating money to that sort of a thing.
Good idea.
Excellent. Great. Yeah. I'm glad to hear you guys are able to get a hold of them and start figuring that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right.
Perfect. Well,
This was a lot more useful than the last call we had.
yeah, this one's a little bit better.
More,